Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Non-Sleep Rules series. Today's episode is titled, If the Meat Smells Like Almonds, Do Not Eat It. Wishing you an enjoyable listening experience. Let's begin. My name is Alex. I'm a photographer, one who specializes in things that have been forgotten. Abandoned houses, rusting amusement parks, and unmarked graves. Perhaps I'm obsessed with endings, or perhaps I'm just looking for a place that matches the rot inside my own soul. Christmas Eve, 2023. While the rest of the world gathered around warm fireplaces, I stood shivering at a derelict train station deep in the Appalachian Mountains. A blizzard was screaming outside, turning the world into a canvas of deathly white. I wanted to go home. No, that's a lie. I just wanted to run away from the city, run away from the memories of my late wife. The station clock had died at 11:55 p.m. The last train rolled into the station. It didn't look like any train I had ever seen. A black iron beast with no name, no number. The engine spewed thick black smoke, even though we live in the age of electric rails. It looked like a relic from a nightmare. I stepped on board. The first thing that hit me wasn't warmth, but the smell. The stench of old diesel fumes mixed with the damp, moldy odor of seat cushions that had soaked up the sweat of thousands of people over decades. And underneath it all, a faint, sickly sweet scent that clawed at the back of my throat. Back then, I didn't know what it was. Now, I do. It was formaldehyde, embalming fluid. My car number 7, was almost empty. There was only one other person. He sat in the shadows, his hoodie pulled up tight. As I passed, he looked up. A gaunt face with eyes sunken into dark sockets, red-rimmed, as if he hadn't slept in 10 days. He looked at me, then down at his wristwatch, the glass face of which was shattered, and muttered, "Late, too late." I chose a seat far away from him, by the window. I put my headphones on, playing a slow jazz track, trying to wall myself off from the world. The train shuddered and began to move. The sound of iron wheels grinding against the tracks, screech, screech, sounded like fingernails dragging down a chalkboard. We plunged into the endless night. About 20 minutes passed, or maybe 2 hours. Time on the train didn't seem to obey the laws of physics. I stared out the window, hoping to see the lights of a passing town. But there was nothing, just thick, suffocating darkness, and occasionally dry, skeletal trees rushing past like bony hands waving goodbye. Suddenly, the music in my headphones was cut off by a piercing static noise. Bzzz, painful and sharp. I tore the headphones off. The atmosphere in the car shifted instantly. The overhead lights began to flicker violently. The cold, a bone-chilling cold, began to seep through my heavy coat. My breath turned into plumes of white mist. Beep, beep, beep. The sound of ringing phones tore through the silence. Not just mine, the hooded man's phone, and even stray phones that had been dropped under the seats long ago. They all screamed in unison. It was the emergency alert system tone. That jarring, dissonant sound that makes your stomach drop. I pulled my phone out. The screen was glowing a harsh crimson red. No signal, no Wi-Fi, yet a message appeared. Sender, the Eternal Rail Management. The text scrolled slowly across the screen, as if someone were typing it at that very moment. Greetings, passenger Alex. Welcome to the dead zone. The real world has been left behind. To keep your life and your soul intact until the final stop, please strictly adhere to the following rules. 1. The red fog. If you look out the window and see the fog turning red, close the blinds immediately. Do not look into the eyes of the things flying alongside the train. 2. The conductors. Only present your ticket to the conductor in the blue uniform. If you see a conductor in a red uniform, hold your breath. He has no eyes. He hunts by the sound of a heartbeat. 3. Dining time. Food will be served after 1 a.m. If the meat smells of almonds, do not eat it. That is the meat of passengers who violated the rules. 4. The restroom. After 3 a.m., do not stare into the mirror for more than 5 seconds. If your reflection smiles at you, break the mirror immediately. 5. The silence. If the train stops abruptly in the woods, do not make a sound. They are boarding. 6. Trust no one. The passenger traveling with you may not be human. Check their ticket. I finished reading, goosebumps erupting all over my skin. I looked up, intending to ask the hooded man if he got the same message. But he was already standing right next to me. "Don't read it out loud," he wheezed, his voice rasping like sandpaper. He held out his ticket for me to see. It was tattered, stained with black smears that looked like dried blood. "I'm Sam. You have to listen to me if you want to live."
"Rule number 2, Sam whispered, his eyes wide, staring toward the end of the car. "He's coming." I held my breath and listened. At first, it was just the wind howling outside, but then I heard it. Clack, clack, the sound of metal striking metal, rhythmic, slow. The connecting door at the far end of the car slowly creaked open. A blast of freezing air rushed in, carrying a heavy, metallic stench of blood. A giant stepped inside. He had to be over 7 feet tall, his head nearly grazing the ceiling of the train. He wore an old-fashioned railway uniform, bright red, red as if it had been dipped in a vat of fresh blood. He walked very slowly. Every step shook the floorboards. Thud, thud. As he passed under a flickering light, I saw his face. No, he didn't have a face. Where his eyes, nose, and mouth should have been, there was only smooth, pale skin like melted wax. He tilted his head slightly, listening to the space around him. Sam yanked me down under the seats. "Hold your breath," he hissed through his teeth. "Don't breathe." I clamped my hands over my nose and mouth, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The footsteps stopped right beside our row. I saw his black leather shoes caked with mud and clumps of human hair. He stood there, that faceless head lowered. I felt an invisible pressure crushing my shoulders. He was listening. He was hunting for the rhythm of life. Thump, thump, thump. My heartbeat sounded so loud in my ears, I was sure it was echoing through the entire car. His hand raised, a sharp metal ticket puncher opening and closing. Click, click. If he found me, that puncher would snap through my skull just as easily as it punched a paper ticket. Tears streamed down my face from fear and lack of air. My lungs began to spasm, burning for oxygen. Just as I was about to break, just as I was about to gasp for air, the train whistle screamed from the engine ahead. The giant froze. The sound seemed to distract him. He turned his body and continued walking toward the next car. Thud, thud. When the footsteps faded completely, Sam and I crawled out, collapsing onto the floor, gasping for air. Sam looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of pity and madness. "Welcome to Train Zero, Alex. Do you believe me now?"
"We can't stay here," Sam said once we had regained our composure. "This car is too close to the rear. The darker it gets, the more dangerous the tail of the train becomes. We have to move forward." I nodded, though doubt still gnawed at me. But staying alone was far more terrifying. We began to move. We passed through car 6, then car 5. The scenery got progressively worse. Car 5 was a sleeper car. Rows of rusting iron bunk beds lined the narrow aisle. Tattered curtains fluttered, even though there was no breeze. There were people here, or things that looked like people. They lay in the bunks, covered entirely by blankets. Some were shaking violently, others lay perfectly still. I heard hushed prayers and choked sobs emanating from beneath those dirty wool covers. In bunk number 14, I saw a young girl. She was sitting up, facing the window. The blinds had been pulled up. Outside, the fog was churning, and just as rule number 1 warned, the fog was shifting from white to a deep, visceral crimson. "Don't look!" Sam shouted, lunging forward to stop her. But it was too late. The girl seemed hypnotized by the glowing red light outside. She slowly pressed her face against the glass. "It's so beautiful," she whispered. "Mommy, I see you." And then I saw something outside the window. A gigantic face, as large as the window itself, materialized in the red mist. It smiled at the girl. Snap! The sound was wet and crunchy. The girl's neck snapped backward a full 180 degrees. She collapsed onto the bunk, her dead eyes still wide open, staring at the ceiling, a look of blissful happiness frozen on her face. I screamed, stumbling back and falling to the floor. "Run! Don't look outside!" Sam hauled me up. We sprinted through the endless corridor, leaving behind the girl's corpse and the ghostly red light that was beginning to seep through the cracks in the glass. We ran until we reached car 4, stopping only because our lungs were burning. I needed to wash my face. I needed to do something to snap back to reality, or I was going to lose my mind. "I need to use the restroom," I said, my voice trembling. Sam grabbed my wrist, his fingernails digging into my skin. "Rule number 4, remember it. Do not trust the mirror. Break it if you see anything wrong." I stepped into the cramped lavatory. The smell of bleach was overpowering, barely masking the stench of sewage rising from the drain. I turned the tap. Yellow, rusty water sputtered out. I splashed it onto my face, trying to wash away the image of the girl's broken neck. I lifted my head to look in the mirror to wipe my face. In the mirror was a gaunt, pale face with panicked eyes. It was me. I let out a sigh of relief. But then, I blinked. My reflection did not blink. I stood frozen. The me in the mirror slowly lowered his hands, while my real hands were still holding the paper towel. It looked at me, and the corners of its mouth slowly curled up, stretching into a grin that reached its ears, revealing rows of jagged black teeth. It began to speak, but no sound came out, only the mouthing of words. "You will die here." It reached out, long, unnatural fingers pressing against the glass from the inside, as if trying to tear through the fabric of reality to drag me into the mirror world. "Ah!" I screamed, grabbing the mini fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. Crash! I smashed the mirror. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces, clattering into the sink. The phantom disappeared. From behind the broken shards, a black, tar-like liquid oozed out, and a piece of old, crumpled paper fell to the floor. I picked it up with shaking hands. It was a torn page from a diary, scrawled in dried blood. Don't trust the one traveling with you. He has no ticket. He died a long time ago. He needs a replacement to leave this place. Check his ticket. My heart stopped. I remembered Sam. I remembered the tattered ticket he held. I remembered how he knew every single rule. I hid the note in my pocket and stepped out, trying to look as normal as possible. But Sam wasn't sitting in the hallway anymore. The intercom crackled to life. Please proceed to the dining car. The feast has begun. I walked toward the dining car, car 3. The lights here were brilliantly bright, a stark contrast to the gloom of the previous cars. And it was packed. Dozens of passengers filled the tables. They were wearing clothes from decades past, 1980s suits, 1960s dresses. All of them had their heads down, eating ravenously. Sam was sitting at a table in the middle of the car, waving at me. "Over here, Alex, the food is hot." He looked different. The fear was gone. He looked euphoric, his eyes shining with a manic hunger. I sat down. A server, an emaciated old woman, placed a plate of stew in front of me. Immediately the smell hit me, sweet, sickly. The scent of almonds. I looked at the meat, a gelatinous, raw red lump. And floating in the thick sauce, I saw a human fingernail painted pink. I gagged, covering my mouth. But Sam, he was eating. He chewed greedily, dark sauce dripping down his chin. "Eat, Alex," he said through a mouthful of food, his voice distorted and deep. "You?" I backed away, my hand gripping the steak knife on the table. "You're not human." Sam stopped chewing. He swallowed the meat whole. He slowly raised his head. It wasn't Sam anymore. The skin on his face began to crack like dry earth. "I've been stuck here for 20 years, Alex," he said, the voice resonating from his chest, not his mouth. "My ticket expired. I need yours. If you eat that meat, or if you die here, I go free." He stood up abruptly. "Get him!" The entire car stood up in unison. The passengers turned around. They had no faces, just wide, gaping mouths filled with shark-like teeth. I flipped the table into Sam's face and turned to run. I sprinted toward the front of the train. Behind me, the roar of the monsters and Sam's heavy footsteps followed close on my heels. I tore through car 2, then car 1. Finally, the steel door leading to the engine room. I slammed my body against it, bursting inside, and locked the heavy deadbolt. I stood there, panting, my back against the door. Boom, boom. The sound of fists pounding on the metal shook the entire room. I turned to look at the engine cab. Despair washed over me. There was no engineer. There were no controls. In the center of the vast, cold room sat a massive lump of flesh, fused with thousands of tubes and grinding metal gears. It was beating. Thump, thump. The train was a living organism. It consumed flesh and souls to keep moving. I saw a logbook on a metal desk. The final entry read, "The only way out is the window. Jump while the train is moving. You will die in the real world, but your soul will escape the loop. To stay is eternal damnation." Crash! The blade of a fire axe punched through the steel door. Sam was breaking in. Through the gap, I saw his red eyes staring at me. "Open the door, Alex. There is no escape." I looked at the front windshield.
Outside was a black abyss and a raging blizzard. The train was moving at incredible speed. Jumping out there was suicide. But I would rather die than become a monster like Sam. "Goodbye," I whispered. I grabbed a metal chair and smashed the windshield. The freezing wind blasted in like a hurricane. Sam tore the door off its hinges and lunged at me, but I had already thrown myself into the void. Darkness. Then blinding light. The smell of antiseptic. The rhythmic beeping of machines. Beep, beep. I opened my eyes. I was in a hospital bed. A doctor and a police officer stood over me. "Alex," the officer said, his voice warm and human, "you're awake. It's a miracle. The train derailed and plunged into a ravine. You were the only survivor." I started to cry. Hot tears rolled down my face. I was alive. I had escaped. The nightmare was over. Even though my body was broken, my legs in casts, I had never felt so happy. They left to let me rest. The room became quiet. The door opened. A nurse pushed a cart in. She wore a mask, her frame thin and frail. "Time to eat, Alex," she said softly. She placed a food tray on my bedside table, a steaming plate of meatloaf. I smiled, my stomach rumbling with hunger. I reached for the spoon. But then, the smile vanished. A familiar scent rose from the meat. Sweet, sharp, almonds. My heart began to hammer. Thump, thump, thump. Cold sweat drenched my sheets. I slowly lifted my eyes to the nurse. She was standing perfectly still, staring at me. She raised a hand and slowly pulled down her mask. Beneath the mask, there was no nose, no eyes, just smooth, pale skin and a wide, gaping mouth, grinning from ear to ear. She leaned down close to my face, whispering in a metallic, static-filled voice that sounded like a broken intercom. "Please enjoy your meal. The train is about to depart." And then the train whistle, choo, choo, screamed, deafening and sharp, coming from right underneath my hospital bed. The hospital room shook violently and then went pitch black. I had never left the train. That's the end of today's episode. Thank you for listening. Goodbye, and see you next time.